So let's just discuss how the history of this BCBP came about. So it was in the late 70s when the leaders of Ang Ligaya ng Panginoon Covenant Community, they realized that, well, the real he-men, called he-men, with leadership potentials were not found in the charismatic prayer meetings. So, majority of it, I think, majority of the members are women. These real men often did not go to the prayer meetings, which were perceived much more as something as good for women activities. And it's not really appropriate for men. That was in the 70s. These same leaders also realized that the businessmen working at the managerial level must have some, di ba, may mga leadership potentials because they need organizational skill to load those under them in achieving corporate goals. They were not present. So the question that brought to them is, how can we win these men for Christ? So in 1979, some of these leaders, including Father Herbert Schneider, it's our present spiritual director of the BCBP, had to observe an evangelistic businessman breakfast organized by some businessman of the Word of God community of Ann Arbor, Michigan, USA. So something clicked, and these leaders thought that men who would not be caught dead in a prayer meeting would probably be willing to attend a breakfast together with other business leaders. So that's the start. So once they came back from US, they started to organize a breakfast, copying the format from Ann Arbor. So they started in Makati. So they started, actually it's not a Saturday, it's a regular working day when businessmen and professionals would be at their district. So paano ko na makita? So the venue is the Makati Sports Club. They reserve a function room. And they practice every Wednesday. So they wanted to make sure that they would end before 9. Then they launched this activity, setting that, say, dapat 20 minutes lang ang sharing. So they launched the activity, and their aim for a breakfast meeting is 1.5 hours. So it was a Wednesday. So, given the figures that 85 million of the Filipinos are Catholic, only, out of that 85 million, only around 13 million are going to church. And out of the 13 million, 20% or 2.6 million are men. So the target and evangelistic thrust of the community has always been toward men. So during the 80s, a turbulent period of change. You already know what happened in the 80s. The ousting, the revolution, the coup, the ascension of national leadership of a housewife. So, madaming, the coup, especially the coup. So, Mike Joseph Jr. elaborated on this. The point then was that in spiritual battles, the forces of darkness would want to get the men. So, sabi niya, if you want to affect the men, you affect the heads of the family, the heads of a business, the heads of the church, and the heads of the government. So the approach of the community is to evangelize the men. So Filipino men still resist spiritual development far more than women in the success rate of women bringing their husband in the community. So may I know, among here present today who are married, ilan ba? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Out of those 5, I'm 6, no? Out of those 6 people here, who among us was invited by our spouse? Ang spouse nag-invite sa'yo?
Oo, kasi ayaw ko talaga eh.
Kasi,
Birthday na lang eh.
although it's already, time has changed, that majority of us already in the community, the men are being the one to influence their spouse to join. But there's still some, just like Bajero, who were influenced by their spouse to join the BCBP, to join the breakfast. For my side of the story, I influenced my wife to join the breakfast. Kasi pumasok ako sa community single. So therefore, the BCBP continues to focus on evangelizing men and drawing them into the community. For the most part, the women in their lives will join them in their journeys, just like the majority of us here. The answer is because such men are in positions of influence in the marketplace. So the breakfast was conceptualized as a breakfast, and it is not a religious event to bring the men in. Make them comfortable to come back and stay. So take note, it's not a religious event, ha? It's just a breakfast. According kanina kay Brother Alexis. So I give you a point to ponder. What's the time of our breakfast? Diba? 7:30 to 9. So from 7:30 to 9, that's 1.5 hours. That's good. We're following the handbook. So 30 minutes is allotted for breakfast. 20 minutes is for the sharing. But if you could compute, 40 minutes is set for chit-chat. So in a breakfast, what do we talk? Aside from the sharing that we listened, the testimony of the sharer, which was supposed to be dapat limit lang tayo 20 minutes. But bakit mas mahaba pa ang time for chit-chat? So the BCBP breakfast actually is a joyful meeting or fellowship of businessmen and professionals. It is a venue where they can discuss business, livelihood concerns, politics, school and sports competition, and anything under the sun before going to work. So yun. Although RA, take note that the breakfast hindi religious, but it's more about fellowship of these businessmen and professionals. 20 minutes na sharing. Meron pa tayong pen. The pen can have allotted 15 minutes. But if you're good, your sharing can be 10 minutes lang. But you're still allotted a very long time for chit-chat. So you talk. But yan yung goal ng breakfast naman natin. It's about fellowship of these businessmen and professionals. So the breakfast was light, not serious, filled with joy and laughter, and a venue where one can encounter a business partner, a colleague, a competitor, a classmate in their elementary, high school, or even college. Continuous attendance to the breakfast strengthened companionship and forged lasting friendship among the breakfasters. The light atmosphere, the relationship formed together with the serious part, the sharing, made men long to come back to breakfast, attend eventually the Life in the Spirit Seminar or BCLP. The forerunner of the present-day Brotherhood Christian Life program. So the breakfast fellowship and the relationship form became the basis for the selective one-on-one evangelization, success of the community, and laid down the foundation for the community life of the BCBP, strong, intimate, personal relationship. So basically, that's the breakfast. The most important was that men could talk and fellowship without any hindrance. So the BCBP members could share with the first-timers how you came to the BCBP, what the BCBP has done for you. Share the influence it has on your business and professional life. There was also a language to the breakfast, and the language was inclusive. The BCBP members do not call each other brothers or sisters. So please take note of that. We don't call bro or sis in the breakfast. As this meant that first-timers were not. We will stop with the lingo. Everybody called each other by the first name. Jerome. From the word. Even the sharers were introduced by their complete names and their business employment title. The singing was community singing designed for everyone to be encouraged to sing. So ideally, tables were circular and formed to encourage fellowship. There's also a joke portion in a breakfast. Before the start, to lighten the mood, it is called the No Guts, No Glory. So, I remember, during my first breakfast, there was a joke portion pa. But later on, nadula na, no? But if we are going to do that, we have to revive the joke for the day.
What's the joke?
What's the joke? Let's ask Google. Okay, the breakfast started out with strong economical atmosphere. There were no banners or pamphlets identifying the group as Catholic. Certainly, there was no altars, crucifixes, or flowers. The point was to draw businessmen to the breakfast regardless of their religious persuasion. Either ano ka mang denomination na. All were welcome, and the lack of overt Catholic influences and symbols ensured no one would feel out of place. Again, the breakfast was inclusive. So for the time management, the starting and the ending on time. Well, one thing that is often reiterated by the initial breakfaster is how everything was done within the allotted time. The rest was modeled on the Ann Arbor breakfast. When they arrived, people were welcome and given name tags. So I think we are forgetting that. You arrive, you give name tags. At 7 a.m. sharp, the MC asked everyone to stand for the blessing of the food and a song. Breakfast was served. A short time later, the MC would get the ball rolling with a few jokes or icebreakers. The newcomers were invited to introduce themselves. So at exactly 7:45, the day sharer was introduced and would give a 20-minute testimony about his relationship with the Lord. At 8:05, someone would give a short response to the sharing. Announcement, closing, and final song. So at 8:20, the breakfast was over. And attendees would go to work with the time to spare. So when they start at 7, they end at 8:20. So 1 hour and 20 minutes now. How about for the sharing? The high point of the breakfast is the sharing of the businessman or the professional about his relationship with Jesus. Sharing is meant to reveal Jesus Christ in the life of the sharer, how Jesus became real and alive in the life of the sharer, and also how Jesus works in the sharers in the lives of the people. Okay, the past of the sharer is really meant to provide background on why Jesus worked in their lives of that person, or on the person's uniqueness. The sharing is a personal testimony of the good news as presented in the terms of the sharer's own experience. So the testimony is about the relationship one has with Jesus and the change on the undergone because of this relationship. Okay, the sharer shared for 20 minutes. Yan lang ang time point. So, what the breakfast is and what it is not. So, it is very clear that the breakfast was, and it is used to evangelize men with leadership potential. Evangelize. But it's not religious. Evangelize. The importance of the breakfast, one, a gift of the Lord to the BCBP. The key instrument of evangelizing sinners. Excuse me. The church, the ones with a relationship with the Lord. In the early beginnings, the Lord made clear to us what is the community's mission. Ano ba ang mission ng community? Winning the marketplace for Christ. Tama. In order for us to accomplish this vision and mission of the BCBP, those to be invited must not only have leadership potential, but also be a change agent in the business world in order to bring about a transformation of the business world in line with the values of the gospel. The businessman's breakfast is therefore just that, a breakfast. It is not a prayer meeting. It is not a worship assembly. It is just businessmen and professionals coming together for breakfast. So, not in a parish hall, but in a venue where businessmen usually gather. So, magkaukaon lang. So, making it look or sound like a church service is to be avoided. It is necessary for the music ministry singing one song after another. In fact, everything that is done has for its purpose to make the place an affair welcoming to business and professionals. We want to create an environment that businessmen want to come back again and again. So, it is to be a place for men and for men. Responsibility of the mission director, as stated kanina ni Brother Alexis, the mission director under niya is, one is really the breakfast. So, the responsibility of a mission director. So, under the chapter head, diba, the mission director, it is responsible for the breakfast. Tatlo yung responsibility niya eh. The breakfast, the outreach, and the CLP, MEP pa, tatlo. So, breakfast, the CLP, and the MEP. Yan yung parang sub-unit. He must make sure that the men's breakfast is supported by the chapter in terms of personal and finance. In allocating the resources, the chapter needs to give priority to men's breakfast over the ladies in the joint. So, dapat yun yung focus ng community natin. The mission director is responsible to the chapter head for choosing men with appropriate gifts for the various tasks connected with the breakfast. This is especially true for men's breakfast head. As far as possible, all who are in any way on the breakfast team need to be a credible witness to the vision and mission of the community. Be active and outstanding example of Christian and business and professional. It is the mission director's responsibility to seek creative solutions to dwindling attendees at the breakfast and the absence of newcomers prior to any major change in the breakfast or substituting any other evangelistic event. These changes need to be discussed with the chapter head, approval to the regional council director, and to the area managing director up to the MANCO. The mission director needs to be aware that the men's breakfast is the major mission activity of the chapter. A chapter actually can be in good standing even without a ladies and a joint breakfast. It will, however, not be a chapter in good standing without an effective men's breakfast. So it is important to keep constantly before the eyes of the men's breakfast team that the men's breakfast exists for the sake of evangelization of newcomers. So in this, the men's breakfast is different in the purpose from the ladies and also the joint breakfast. Actually, we can have a ladies' breakfast, not the same format as the men. They can have Zumba activities for their ladies' breakfast. But for men, hindi kita pwede to have a Zumba activity. We have to follow. What is the importance of evangelizing men and the men's breakfast? The brotherhood of Christian businessmen and professionals is actually a brotherhood. It is not a brotherhood and a sisterhood. It is men's organization that exists primarily for the purpose of evangelizing other men from the business world and the professions, because they believe that only men can really evangelize other men. Kita daw, we can evangelize other men. Creating an evangelistic environment for the breakfast target market. So how do we choose the venue of the men's breakfast? How do we choose? So the breakfast venue is actually not a chapel. So we don't. The breakfast is not a religious service. Therefore, no flowers, no altars, no statues, no candles. It is also not a prayer meeting with some coffee and food. It is not a worship assembly. It is just breakfast. The more our breakfast venue resembles other meetings of business associations, the better. So the way the venue looks and is set up is governed by the purpose of the meeting, which is to create a place where businessmen and professionals would feel welcome and home, including those who are not naturally very pious. So how do we create an evangelistic environment? Creating an evangelistic environment for the evangelization of men, specifically for businessmen and professionals, starts with selecting the venue. The venue should be what? Accessible, presentable, dapat may parking, charge reasonable rates, mahal, and can sit comfortably the average attendance of the breakfast. So adequate provisions for a stage, though not necessarily elevated, but important thing, we have the BCBP streamers, provision for professional sound system, just like this. My laptop, my projector, my screen if necessary, a place outside the room for registration, my greeters, syempre may entrance. The tables should be preferably be rounded tables. Actually, for better interaction. If there's a round table, you can interact. That's good. Diba? There should be a place in the room where coffee and the food can be available. If buffet. Or plated naman, the food is delivered by the waiters. So in us, we don't deliver it na kukuha, but ang service team would be the one delivering the food. Parang something, more meaningful. So normally, we have the following streamers and standees. So sabi dito, outside the venue, we should have the welcome streamers. I don't know if we have the welcome streamer. Outside the door, in the registration, outside the door, we have the welcome standee. Okay, so in front, we have the rostrum with the BCBP chapter logo or the outreach or mission banner. How about behind the rostrum? On the right side, we have to change the face of business. Right side. On the left side, we have the breakfast. Come, have breakfast with Jesus. Come, let's have. How about on the sides? On the side down, doon na natin nilagay si Be Honest, si Go Forth, and the BCBP times and this. I think we have set up. correctly. So, what should be avoided as a venue? Ito po, hindi natin gagamitin ito as venue. These are all places that promote values incompatible with the gospel. Example, biraw, sabi niya. Nightclubs. Sing-along bars. So we don't use that. Likewise, venues where businessmen would not congregate. Di man sila guro magkaunasiin. Sa bahay kubo, sa karinderyas. Hindi man natin. It should not be allowed. But more importantly, if we find the venue, it should be accessible, may adequate parking, and okay lang ang rate, charge reasonable rates. Okay, let's go to the next. The theme of the men's breakfast. Later on, this theme would be discussed further on their responsibilities and duties. So the breakfast team is composed of the breakfast head, the MC, the music ministry, the administrative assistants, and the review team. So the team should consist of active businessmen and professional as far as possible. Men who have already retired from the business world cannot witness adequately. So, we have to choose now active businessmen and professionals. The team needs to be welcoming and should take special concern that all guests feel welcome and at home. This includes actively making sure that the guests are introduced to the others who are at the breakfast. Reaching out to newcomers is not just the responsibility of the one who brought the guests, but it's the entire team. There should be no first-timers table. Take note of that. Where the first-timers would sit with their sponsor, parang isolated. So we need to avoid those. The first-timers and the sponsor should sit with the same table with the other members of the community. Being introduced to other members and getting to know them will make it easier for the first-timer to come back without his sponsor, since he already knows number of people at the breakfast. So, dapat hindi sila isolated. The team needs to make sure that the atmosphere in the venue is mainly and not sweetly pious. More about this will be found later. Okay, the format of the men's breakfast is lang. The introduction. The men's breakfast of the BCBP welcomes anyone, irrespective of background, with the purpose of leading them closer to Christ. So, take note, especially the MC, needs to be sensitive to the background of the people who are brought to the breakfast or yung mga first-timers. Example, sponsor should make sure that the MC knows if they are brought, say example, Protestants to the breakfast. It is important that the sponsor actually explain to a Protestant why Catholics make the sign of the cross at the beginning of prayer. If the sponsor is bringing a non-Christian, he should explain that the BCBP is a Catholic organization. He should be available to the person after the meeting to answer questions. In general, the men's breakfast should not be longer than 1.5 hours from the actual opening prayer to the closing prayer. Okay? Next, before the actual start of the breakfast, it's the preparation. So a period of 30 minutes before the opening of the registration, the breakfast team should have set up the streamers outside announcing the breakfast. So for example, if the start of the breakfast is 7:30, the team should be there at 7. So, by 7, before 7:30, the streamers outside are prepared, set up na ang table, ang stage in front, ang streamers in front, ang registration table, the sound system, everything should be prepared. We have already coordinated with the kitchen for the food. So about 30 minutes for the registration normally precedes our breakfast, during which members and newcomers sign in, get a name tag, meal ticket, kain. This period also has for the purpose of getting to know one another. During this time, the music ministry might sing a song or two. It is not necessary to keep on singing one song after another. The members of the music ministry should also mingle and get to know, especially the first-timers. During this time, attendees should be able to get a cup of coffee to get them going. Well, basically, breakfast is still not served. Kasi ano pala tayo, registration. In the actual breakfast, so what specified time, the MC opens the breakfast with a song, followed by a prayer. The opening prayer should be short and must be extemporaneous. The prayer should not be read because written prayers tend to be long and pious. Usually, the opening prayer should contain two elements lang. Thanking God for the new day and bringing all the attendees together for the breakfast, and two, saying a blessing for the food to be served. So, the prayer should be manly and should not follow usual, the acts. It should also not contain petition and prayers for healing that only, the members can appreciate. After a short prayer, the MC should invite the people to enjoy their breakfast. A good, clean joke might help break the ice and put people at ease. So, dapat may joke of the day. Okay. So, after the breakfast, the MC presents the major part of the breakfast as follows. The introduction of the BCBP. So, remember there's the video clipping. We should use that. So, this should be a very short introduction. I think that is around 4 minutes. Preferably, the BCBP breakfast PowerPoint presentation during, NAC 36. Emphasizing the breakfast but gives no emphasis to a chapter of community life. So we use that one. The MC should also mention that the BCBP is a member of the Philippine Council for the Laity under the direction of the Episcopal Commission for the Lay Apostolate, ECLA. So the breakfast is a first introduction to the BCBP of newcomers, and basically we do not want to overwhelm. How about the opening prayer? We should avoid mentioning first-timers. It is more appropriate to include them in the closing prayers. So the introduction should be short. It should not give any detailed presentation of the vision and mission. It is enough to say that we want to bring Christ into the marketplace and the professions and win the marketplace for Christ. Example, work for the transformation of business in line with the values of gospel. There is to be no reading of the gospel of the day. Also avoid liturgical readings with a short reflection. How about introduction of the newcomers or the first-timers? So please take note, if they come up to the podium to introduce themselves, the MC must make sure that a card with the points of introduction be already on the podium. Nawala na yung mga natin, yung mga card. So if I could remember at that time, it's the first timer would only introduce their name, the nickname, the spouse, children, and their profession.
Sponsors.
And especially, ang pinakalas ng sponsor. That's yan lang, ang introduce nila. And we would say, hi, nickname. It is not really necessary that for everyone to come up and shake the newcomer's hand after the introductions are done. What we can do is palakpakan lang daw natin sila. Of course, the BCBP members who sit at the same table, we can welcome them with their when they return to their seats by shaking hands. So, hindi na need that what we're been practicing is the community welcome, di ba? So, not necessary. What's the role of the sponsor? First, introduce your guests to those at your table. If possible, also to some others. For your guest to come back, he or she must feel part of the breakfast group. How about the breakfast attendees? The MC finally summarized by telling newcomers that they can now come to the breakfast and bring other first-timers. We've been doing that if there's a new breakfast. So the MC introduces the sharer. So the sharer's introduction should follow the inclusive language without mentioning ang bro or ang sis, but should focus on the business and professional qualification of the sharer or the sharers, inclusive of their business affiliation and other information. The sharer and the sharing at the men's breakfast. Mga ganito na lang, I think. It is sufficient to say that the sharing should present clearly and in an inspiring way how someone found the Lord through the community. The sharing should be short and to the point, and from the start to finish, glorify the Lord and invite others to come to the Lord. It should never be longer than 20 minutes. If you are doing your pen, you would realize your pen is just 10 minutes. When the sharing is too long, members in the hall began to lose interest and engage in conversation with one another or entertain themselves with their cell phone. So actually, it is customary to pray over the sharer prior to the sharing. But it should be done outside of the breakfast menu. Either in another room or in another place na hindi makita ng new breakfast. Third. How about to the response to the sharing? The MC or someone else responds to the sharing with an appropriate short scriptural verse or possibly with an appropriate song. It's or in the end. So or. It is crucial that the person who gives the response has a copy of the sharing ahead of time. The response should be short. It should not attempt to summarize any sharing and above all, it should not preach. Personal comments on the sharer's life should be avoided. For the scriptural response, it would be discussed further later. How about the announcement and the end of the breakfast? When we do announcement, the MC first of all expressed gratitude to the sharer for his contribution. He makes sure any final announcements are made. The breakfast is not the place for announcement about the CLPs or any other activity by the community. So ang announcement should be for the breakfast lang. So the MC tells the first-timer that they are always welcome for the breakfast and they can also sponsor other businessmen or professionals, and of course, pay for their breakfast of those they bring. He also tells them that the color of the name tag will be changed from white after they have attended for breakfast meeting, signifying that they have become regular breakfasters. If there is a ma-promote means from white it will become blue-brown, no? Blue. From white to blue.
From blue to...
From blue to white. Like that.
White.
White to blue. From white to blue. From white to blue. The new regular breakfaster should be welcomed by applause. We may also announce, during the announcement, we can also announce birthday of breakfasters and possibly wedding anniversaries. So the MC or someone else says a closing prayer, which includes 1, a thank you for the food. Number 2, prayer for the divine assistance for newcomers and regular members, that all we do it before the honor of glory in God. Then this is followed by a final song and the end. So there is no need to give first-timers a gift or a token of appreciation. What is more important is the committed follow-up of the one who invited the first-timer. There is also no need to give a gift or token of appreciation to the sharer. What's the tone of the men's breakfast? The tone we want to set at our men's breakfast is expressed well in the song, "We are men in Jesus Christ. We've come to serve the Lord." So, it is very important for all members of the breakfast team to consider them warriors for Christ. In the prayer, in songs, in the sharing, newcomers should realize that the BCBP members are the knights of King Jesus. They are deeply humbled that the Lord in His mercy found them and chose them as His servants, and at the same time proud to belong to the King and called to stand in His presence and serve them. The joy, wonder, and pride to be King's man should come through the way the opening and closing prayer is said. It should come through in the songs that are chosen. First-timers and guests should realize that they are having breakfast with the King's men. It is precisely this proud, joyful, strong commitment to Christ that will attract other strong men.